Secretary Griswold told me today that she had not decided whether to tell you, the public, about that password leak before she got called out on it publicly today. I asked Secretary Griswold whether she takes responsibility for this election security breach in the same way that she has held others accountable, and we discussed a string of errors by her office that can damage voter confidence.
To be very clear, we do not see this as a full security threat to the state. This is not a security threat.
You do frequent media interviews warning of the insider threats to elections. The U.S. Department of Homeland Security defines an insider threat as somebody who uses authorized access wittingly or unwittingly to do harm. Did the actions of your office pose an insider threat to elections?
No.
In 2021, when Mesa County's voting system passwords leaked, your office said, quote, "The public disclosure of the BIOS passwords for one or more components of Mesa County's voting system alone constitutes a serious breach of voting system security protocols." By that standard, did your office commit a serious breach of voting system security protocols?
Well, to push back on you, Kyle, that sentence is in the press release, but there is a much bigger press release. And part of that investigation in Mesa County was 2 sets of passwords, unauthorized access, stolen passwords, and it was in a different time. Since 2021 and what happened in Mesa County, our security has improved, including the 24/7-hour cameras, including the badge and access. The law has been significantly strengthened since then. We have multiple layers in place to ensure situations like Mesa County don't occur, and that is not what is occurring here.
This is not the first time that your office has made mistakes that have damaged voters' confidence in our elections. In 2022, your office sent out mailers to 30,000 non-citizens inviting them to register to vote. They, of course, are not eligible to register to vote. That same year, your office used Colorado's ballot tracking system to send messages to specific Coloradans encouraging them to vote when, in fact, they had already voted, causing confusion that had to be cleaned up by the county clerks. And now this leak of the voting system passwords. Given your office's repeated errors that have damaged confidence in our elections, which you say is paramount, will you resign?
Absolutely not, Kyle. And I just want to, you're unfairly characterizing and leaving out some crucial information. We came out immediately and said a postcard had been sent out to people who are ineligible. The postcard clearly stated that someone had to be a U.S. citizen. No one tried to register from that group of people. We were actively tracking it. And it became a situation where no one registered. And to push back even further, Kyle, Colorado is tied for #1 in confidence in the country in our elections. We have stood up to situations time and time again to protect the right of Coloradans, going over and beyond what anybody would ask of civil servants in this office.
Secretary of State Jena Griswold has managed to unite her fellow Democrats with Republicans in disgust over her handling of her office's leak of voting machine passwords. Tonight, 9 News investigates the bipartisan frustration from county elections officials. Here's Marshall Zellinger.
The post-election audit of voting machines was completed today, and it verified the ballots that were run through the voting machines were counted accurately. At a hearing in front of lawmakers that helped determine the budget for the Secretary of State's office, Democrat Jena Griswold used that audit as additional proof that nothing was compromised by the leak of voting machine passwords.
It confirmed, again, the accuracy of the results and that voting equipment worked exactly how it should have.
At the hearing yesterday, Griswold also defended the timeline about the password leak she learned about on October 24th, but did not notify county clerks until October 29th.
I regret that some clerks learned about the issue from a source that was not the department.
Was the plan to contact the clerks once you had determined the scope of that breach, Secretary Griswold?
We were planning to determine the entire scope and then determine what our next steps would be.
Emails 9 News Investigates requested show some of the clerks' disgust. The day before the election, Boulder County Clerk Molly Fitzpatrick, a Democrat, wrote this email to the communications director at the Secretary of State's office and copied the higher-ups, including Griswold. My understanding and sympathy has turned into complete irritation and disdain at the lack of support we are getting to communicate to voters. At this point, I have no hope that you will be supporting clerks with communications, and I'm turning my attention elsewhere. Fremont County Clerk Justin Grantham, a Republican, found out his voting machines were not impacted on October 30th from this email sent from the Secretary of State's office. My sincere apologies for keeping you all in suspense, but you are the group who did not have any equipment in the leak. The day before the election, Grantham wrote Griswold this letter seeking a detailed explanation for what happened and an apology. If you can't do either of these things, then I request you step aside and allow someone else to finish out the remainder of your term. Grantham finished the letter, I cannot in good conscience trust you in this position and defend your office. The Secretary of State's office has hired an outside law firm to look into how the passwords were leaked online, which will cost right now around $25,000. But we know how. It was an employee who had passwords in a hidden file, and then that got uploaded to the website. The voter confidence is, what did the office do to confirm each security measure worked along the way?
Yeah, that is the threat here, to voter confidence, not to the system. Interesting, Marshall, you hear from clerks who are critical of Griswold, and then there are quiet clerks. There are not a line of clerks out the door to defend her. Marshall Zellinger, thank you.
Okay, Coloradans, we got to talk about our Secretary of State, Jena Griswold. Excuse the ducks, they're not a fan of hers either. So my issue with Jena Griswold is she presents as extraordinarily partisan. She is. Whereas I think in the environment that we're in, where there are many folks who have skepticism around our elections, whether or not that's valid is a different topic, but being partisan is only going to build that skepticism. It's important that you reach across the aisle, that you try to build trust in both parties. Additionally, she has zero experience running elections. So, like I said, in this environment, we as Coloradans, I think, owe it to ourselves to elect someone who has experience running elections. She's also proven she can't play nice with all the county clerks. This woman is not fit for this job. She can go pursue whatever she would like with the Democratic Party, higher office. I don't care. I don't want her reelected. So, Coloradans, vote smart this November.
And new this morning, Secretary of State Jena Griswold responding to another effort by Republicans to remove her from office. State House GOP members sending a letter to the Colorado House Speaker calling to impeach Jena Griswold. In the letter, Republicans claim Griswold used her position as a platform for her, quote, partisan political ideology, and that she's unfit for office. This call comes after the Supreme Court ruled against a group of voters who tried to remove former President Donald Trump off of Colorado's primary ballot. That effort was unsuccessful. The Supreme Court deciding unanimously against Colorado's Supreme Court.
Right, which had then implications for more than a dozen states across the country. In a statement, she says the Colorado Republican Party continues to focus on conspiracies and political games. I will not be intimidated by this baseless proceeding. While the Republican House caucus wastes taxpayer dollars to score cheap political points, you can find me working for Colorado voters, Republican, Democratic, and unaffiliated alike, to ensure they can make their voices heard in free and fair elections. So we'll be watching this as, again, this is now another effort to remove her.
And not only did Mike Johnson spew lies about voting equipment, about the election, about non-existent voter fraud, he also used his law degree to try to get a bunch of Republicans in Congress to join a litigation to stop the peaceful transfer of the presidency. And then even after January 6th, he refused to certify the election and to vote to certify. So ultimately, I don't see how Republicans in Congress can run from election denialism. At this point, they are complicit. They are complicit to the voter suppression laws, the threats to election workers, the threats to election administration, because he is the speaker. And what I think we could see from him, and why he's such a big danger, besides just the position he holds, is that he could push voter suppression bills in Congress. He could weaponize the House committees. He could try to exert influence, just like they did in 2020 on election boards and secretaries of state. So overall, I think it's a dreadful sign that House Republicans chose him. But ultimately, the American people can right this ship. They can hold these folks accountable and make sure to stop election denialism next year in the elections. Current litigation that he's representing the Colorado Republican Party is trying to disenfranchise 50% of our electorate. We have a primary system where unaffiliated voters can vote either in the Republican primary or Democratic primary. And what they are trying to do is to close those primaries down so unaffiliateds can't vote in the party primaries. Unserious party that hires unserious people, including Eastman, who is more than unserious. He's a danger to our democracy, and he should be absolutely disbarred. There is no reason that attorneys should remain in practice who are working against the United States Constitution.
We're getting some reaction from the Secretary of State there in Colorado, who wrote on X, "I am disappointed in the U.S. Supreme Court's decision stripping states of the authority to enforce Section 3 of the 14th Amendment for federal candidates. Colorado should be able to bar oath-breaking insurrections from our ballot," she writes. But again, the Supreme Court saying that just isn't the case here.
You know, that language that Jena Griswold used in the tweet that you just read from is paralleled by some language and the concurrence from Justice Sotomayor, Justice Kagan, and Justice Jackson. And at the very last paragraph of their concurrence, they write, "Today, the majority goes beyond the necessities of this case to limit how Section 3 can bar an oath-breaking insurrectionist," the same language Jena Griswold uses, "from becoming president." So while the per curiam decision goes out of its way not to say anything at all about whether Donald Trump, in fact, violated his oath or participated or committed insurrection, you've got the three liberal justices here characterizing this case in a way that suggests they believe that he is.
My larger reaction is disappointment. I do believe that states should be able, under our Constitution, to bar oath-breaking insurrectionists. And ultimately, this
here, she's hyper-partisan, so everything she does, a lot of Americans, and especially Coloradans, are wary whose interests she really is serving with these decisions. So when it came out only days before the 2024 election that her office, which is in charge of all of Colorado's elections, had accidentally published 600 BIOS passwords to their voting machine systems, people were furious about it.
Democratic Secretary of State Jena Griswold's office was not going to tell county election clerks and the public that they had accidentally leaked voting machine passwords. 9 News Investigates has obtained an audio recording. The passwords had been inadvertently posted on her website in the hidden tab of a spreadsheet, sitting there for months. Clerks were upset to find out about it through the news. Griswold told me that day that she hadn't decided whether the public was ever going to be told.
Well, now we know that her office went to great lengths to cover this up, saying on this newly leaked call between her office and county clerks that they don't want to create a media storm around this. You can't make this up. And listen to the pushback they got from these county clerks, shocked by the level of incompetence coming out of her office. Roll the tape.
Fox 21.
New audio leaked by the Colorado GOP reveals the Secretary of State's office did not want to tell county clerks they accidentally posted voting system passwords online because of concerns over backlash.
Officials say that those passwords were put on the Secretary of State's website in June. They remained online until they were taken down on October 24th. On October 29th, workers began changing passwords, and county clerks were then informed.
In leaked audio of 2 calls, Deputy Secretary of State Christopher Beal could be heard telling county clerks it took so long to tell them because of concerns it would create a, quote, media storm. Here is El Paso County Clerk Steve Schleicher's reaction in a call with the Secretary of State's office and the Department of State.
The media and the citizens in particular, specifically the media, I've been dealing with an onslaught from everything here in the El Paso County area, is the Secretary has lost complete credibility down here.
Now, the Colorado GOP, is calling for Jena Griswold's immediate resignation. A spokesperson for the Colorado State Department said that in a statement, quote, that this short audio is from calls between the department and the clerks and is a small portion of what the Secretary of the Department staff conveyed to the clerks.
Allow voters the right to choose Donald Trump if they want.
Dave, but your Secretary of State, I saw this in real time. She is not going to count the ballots. So Trump being on the ballot is not a cure-all. Listen to what she said she will do if the Supreme Court upholds the state of Colorado.
And if the Supreme Court rules in favor of the Colorado Supreme Court to remove Trump from the ballot, but his name is still there, what happens then?
Colorado's elections take into account candidates who either drop out of a race when their name is already on the ballot or otherwise unable to be voted on. So in that situation, if voters cast a ballot or a vote for someone who is disqualified, we would not be able to count those votes.
So Jena Griswold will not count the 1.3 million ballots. That's how many turned out for Trump in 2020.
Yeah, look, Jena Griswold is a partisan hack. She's a hyper radical Democrat posing as an election official. And this is nothing more than election interference on the part of her and other Democrats. That's why we're so hopeful that the Supreme Court will smack this ruling down and allow the voters the right to support Donald Trump.
We're seeing the extreme right use threats to intimidate election workers and secretaries of state. And it just shows what is on the line. If a political party is trying to cheat, steal, or intimidate, there are major problems with that party. They are dangerous to American democracy.
Because you are the chair of the DAS, the Democratic Association of Secretaries of State. And I wonder if you can just talk a little bit about the trends that we're seeing in these races, especially when we get to talking about election deniers on the ballot.
Absolutely. First off, thank you for having me. It's so lovely to see you. And my job as Colorado Secretary of State is to make sure to expand access and to ensure the security of our elections for every Republican, Democrat, and unaffiliated voter. That should be the role of every Secretary of State in this country. But like you mentioned, we are seeing election deniers run across the country as chief election officers. That's what secretaries of state are in the majority of states. They're running in places like Arizona, Nevada, Michigan, Minnesota, New Mexico. These are folks who, if they win, will be in charge of upholding free and fair elections, but who, in fact, do not believe in free and fair elections. It's an absolute danger to American stability and our democracy, and Americans will have this vital role to play to stop these election deniers on November 8th.
Jena Griswold is joining us now. Thanks so much for being with us. Talk to me about what you now do. You're in charge of elections there. Do you get a ballot prepared that has Donald Trump's name on it? Do you assume that his appeal, he says he's going to appeal, we know he's going to, they were prepared for this. So this puts it on hold and he will be on the primary ballot.
Well, thanks for having me on. This is definitely a historic case. In fact, it's historic because usually we don't have presidents trying to steal elections and then running for office again. The Colorado Supreme Court has clearly spoken. They have determined that he engaged in insurrection and is disqualified from the ballot unless the United States Supreme Court holds otherwise. So looking forward towards ballot certification, we will wait to see if this case is appealed and if the United States Supreme Court takes the case and go from there.
So if he appeals, but they haven't yet taken it, what do you do then? Because I think the state Supreme Court said that if he shows any sign of appealing, if he files an appeal, this is stayed. It's on hold.
Well, we assume Trump will appeal, and what the court order said is basically if he appeals, the case basically resets himself. It's assumed that he's on unless the United States Supreme Court intercedes or decides that, they aren't going to take the case or decide the case. So the big picture is that I think we have to wait to see how this plays out.